Hey guys, it's me again, Eric here at Mountaintop 9, and right now we are deep into the month of October, and it's this time of the autumn season where the music of Mercyful Fate really rings true to me. The mystical feeling, especially on an album like Melissa. It's just so timeless and it just possesses your mind when you feel that music surging through the speakers, especially on a song like, I don't know, like At the Sound of the Demon Bell, for instance. I still remember sometime, it was in the early 2000s, and I'd listened to this album many times before, of course, but something about it clicked so strongly with me where I connected it to the month of October and to around the time of Halloween. I was driving in my car and it was a really windy day and there were fallen leaves all over the road and they were just kind of blowing in the wind right as that opening riff to At the Sound of the Demon Bell started playing, and that's kind of when I made this connection between the album Melissa and the month of October. Something about it, just that song right there, At the Sound of the Demon Bell. I mean, that opening riff, it's got this hard rock feel to it, but it has the darkness of metal. It has the heaviness that is inherent in metal, but it just has, and I love the dark shading to it. Hank Sherman was a master at coming up with very colorful riffs. He wasn't playing stock, basic type riffs. He was playing stuff that possessed an edge and kind of made you go, that's an interesting sounding riff. I like what he did there. I like how he did some, minor type keys and kind of mixed it in a unique way and added some shade in with the lightness of it. And he just had a very cool dynamic in his riff writing. And that song right there, just that one, At the Sound of the Demon Bell, some of the greatest riffs ever recorded, period. And that's a song that I feel is very underrated. You don't hear people say a lot of times, that's my favorite Mercyful Fate song. I wouldn't be able to pick a favorite Mercyful Fate song, but if I had to, that one would definitely be up there in the top 5. I'll tell you that right now. Now, the opening song, Evil, it just gets things off to such a great start. Mercyful Fate and this album, Melissa, this came out at a time where heavy metal was considered dangerous, okay? It was a shocking type of music. When King Diamond was singing lyrics like Dig Up Your Body Again and Make Love to Shame and I'll be the first to watch your funeral and I'll be the last to leave, stuff like that back then. And even when I was a kid, when I was growing up in the early and mid 90s when I first started listening to Mercyful Fate, stuff like that seemed dangerous. It was provocative. Nowadays, if a band comes out and does lyrics like that, it doesn't even raise an eyebrow. Society has changed so much. Everything has progressed to such an extent that this stuff seems, it doesn't possess the same shock value. But the timelessness of this music and of the lyrics, if you put this on now and play it, you will feel that rush of power that you felt when you were a teenager, okay, or when you were a kid and you first heard this album. If you grew up with it, it takes you back, man. As soon as this album starts, it takes you back. You're flooded with all of those memories of having, heavy metal posters all over your wall, Mercyful Fate, Iron Maiden, Venom, Bathory, Sabbath, all of that stuff. Creator, Slayer, that's what it takes me back to. It takes me back to that magical time of my youth when this stuff was dangerous, when parental figures didn't like this kind of music. They said that's crazy devil music. They didn't want it in the house, so that's what it has, that still has that edge. It takes you back, man. And the thing I love about the sound of Melissa too, as soon as that first song, as soon as the first notes ring out, and you hear King Diamond's falsetto coming out there in such a ghostly way. He sounds like a poltergeist released inside your house, and his voice is just swirling around, almost causing you, he wants to drive you insane. He wants to make goosebumps break out all over your flesh. That's what that voice is trying to do. It's very haunting. But also the impression you get is this cavernous feeling because the reverb is pushed up just like it should be, because reverb builds atmosphere And it does that on this album because it feels like the sound of this music is swirling around you. It's cavernous. It sounds like the band could have recorded this in some grand cathedral somewhere. And you imagine all of these stained glass windows with gruesome depictions on them, and black candles lit everywhere, and an altar with a sacrifice laying upon it. And you know, that's what it gives to you. And King Diamond's lyrics on this album, you know, King Diamond is heavily into the Anton LaVey philosophy of Satanism, of believing in yourself, and all of that. But on albums like Melissa and Don't Break the Oath, what he's largely doing is telling horror stories, okay? He's not really espousing the LaVeyan brand of Satanism or anything like that. There's sprinkles of it here and there in the lyrics. Like you can hear, for instance, on Don't Break the Oath at the end of Come to the Sabbath. Well, he's, you know, spitting out some Anton LaVey type of lines. But on this album, Melissa, and on other Mercyful Fate stuff, he's really just telling these dark, horrific stories where Satan is like an entity, is like this powerful force, and he's talking about evil and all of this and kind of gruesome things, you know, actual satanic cults committing sacrifices, you know, bringing the blood of a newborn child and laying a woman down upon an altar and sacrificing her at a black funeral. You know, all of this kind of bleak, grim, horror movie type imagery. And that's the cool thing about this. I mean, it's really a fun album, and it does connect very well to this time of year, to Halloween, because of, you know, these stories. Each song is like this eerie depiction of something. You know, in the song Evil, it seems to be talking about, well, exactly what the title is. It's very aptly titled, because you have this guy who's some kind of psychopath. He probably has some kind of occult powers. He's talking about being raised from his grave by the dead, and he gets off on committing sadistic atrocities, and he talks about committing necrophilia on a dead body, digging it up out of the ground, and then making love to it. You know, that song tells a story, and then Curse of the Pharaohs, I mean, that's self-explanatory right there. So we got some mummy type horror going on. Into the Coven, self-explanatory again, and on and on. This each song is telling some evil, satanic type of story. These lyrics on here, yeah, nowadays wouldn't raise an eyebrow. Back then, crazy stuff. But let's talk about each one of these songs. Like I've already said about Evil, that gets the album started off in a really great way. There's a lot of there's a real good galloping feel to this song, and towards the end it really starts to thrash out and get really fast. My personal favorite part of the song is that part where King Diamond starts to say, and when you're down beyond the ground, you know, that whole part about digging up your body again. The riff under that is just so great. It's so catchy. It's just classic. It just makes you feel good. That's the thing. A lot of the stuff on here is fun to listen to, even though it's dark and devilish. It's also fun, and it fucking rocks. This isn't like, you know, when you put on something, like when you were younger and you put on something like Morbid Angel or something like that, and it's dark and devilish, but it's also, you know, oppressive and heavy and kind of dour and all this. No, this shit is evil, and King Diamond is spitting out all of these macabre lines, but it's fun to listen to. It makes you feel great. Then moving on, Curse of the Pharaohs. That opening riff, it's just perfection. And it's one of those types of riffs where many different metal bands of that era have their own spin on this type of riff. You know what I mean? A famous example is like with Iron Maiden with 2 Minutes to Midnight. It has a similar type riff to it. And so it just evokes that era. You put on Curse of the Pharaohs and you're instantly transported back to the 80s as soon as that riff starts to play. And then Into the Coven, the way it starts out with the acoustic guitar and it sounds really nice. It sounds very welcoming and inviting and friendly. And you got some electric guitar over that, a nice little lead guitar, and it just paints this welcoming environment. But then suddenly the song shifts and you feel the darkness starting to pervade the room as it plays. Because let me tell you, that main riff that starts churning on Into the Coven, it just gives you that rush of sinister energy because it's those nice minor notes, that nice shade that I told you about. Hank Shermann could really write that kind of stuff at this time. It's just one of the greatest Mercyful Fate riffs ever, that main riff on Into the Coven. The lyrics are just typical King Diamond type stuff. He's talking about welcoming someone into his coven, become Lucifer's child, but it's really that riff. It's really about the music on Into the Coven and the darkness that it makes you feel. And that's the thing, on this album, Hank Shermann wrote all of the music. On later albums, you know, King Diamond contributed heavily. Like on the 90s Mercyful Fate albums, King Diamond wrote a ton of stuff on those albums musically, but on this one, Hank Shermann did it all. Every fucking riff, at least that's what it says in the credits. And then track 4, At the Sound of the Demon Bell. Hey, I already started out talking about this song at the beginning of the video. Like I said, that riff. You could take that riff and make your own religion around just it and fucking kneel down before an altar and worship it, because that's how good it is, and this song is just timeless. But I've already ranted enough about At the Sound of the Demon Bell. You know how I fucking feel about it. Put that song on, turn it up loud, and listen to it. Okay, Black Funeral. Now this is where things get really provocative. This is the type of stuff back then that sent people into a tizzy. You know, if church groups heard a song like this and heard lyrics like this, their hair would turn white, okay? People freaked out about stuff like that. Back then, it's funny because you had all this backmasking type stuff. You had people worried about hidden messages in songs. You had people worried about, AC/DC stands for Antichrist Devil's Child, and KISS is Knights in Satan's Service. You know, people said, Stairway to Heaven played backwards has messages to My Sweet Satan, and all of this type shit. Here you had Mercyful Fate. They're right up front with you. They're putting it all out on the line. King Diamond didn't give a fuck. He's telling you what it's all about. He wants to shock you and he wants to scare these people and give them a heart attack. Because listen to the lyrics on this song. It's all about ritual sacrifice and a dark, malevolent cult. He wasn't singing about some kind of Wiccan type thing, okay? He wasn't singing about white magic or even the Anton LaVey brand of Satanism, which is, you know, pretty benign when you think about it. No, what he was singing about was the horror movie cults that commit sacrifice, and it's just it's a gruesome feeling. This song has a grimy, cavernous sound. The reverb is swallowing you up. You feel like you're in a dark cave with black candles everywhere. The evil drips from it. You know, you can just picture goats, an actual Satan entity with horns, you know, and all that. Just morbid stuff. And then one of my favorite parts is that riff that plays right after he says, "She was a victim of my coven." Right after that line the first time, there is this riff. It's so grimy, and the riff literally sounds bloody. Like, the riff has this sinister edge to it where you really feel like someone was sacrificed, like they cut some lady's throat or something like that, and there's this blood dripping down the altar and onto the ground, and it makes you feel like that. You know how I was talking about some stuff on this album earlier that's kind of like, feels like fun? Well, this song's different. Mercyful Fate could do both, so that's what I gotta point out here. On a song like Black Funeral, this song sounds evil, pure and through. Not just the lyrics, but the music too. The music matches the darkness. of these lyrics, you know, because lyrics like this on a song like Black Funeral, they really remind me of like horror stories and urban legends. So a song like Black Funeral really brings that fear home. It makes it feel real. It, you know, kind of invades your own personal space. This is a confrontational song, you know. So Black Funeral is a classic. Great Mercyful Fate right there. Okay, as far as Satan's Fall goes, I have mixed feelings on this song. For me, you know how it was written. Hank Sherman would just keep adding stuff onto this song. He would write some riffs and he'd write some riffs and he'd just kind of keep adding onto this song. And I guess he was playing it in his apartment or something, or house or whatever, on a guitar, and each night he just kept building and building, like someone building a house brick by brick. That's what he did with this song. It's hit and miss. There are parts of Satan's Fall that are just great and transcendent. This is a long song. It's an epic. You know, I like some of it, and other parts I'm like, meh, it's alright. But overall, I can take it or leave it. I'll tell you what I wish would have been on this album. Actually, there are two songs I wish could have been on this album, but right now I'm just going to talk about one. The song Burning the Cross. Now, if you want to hear that song, and most of you, I'm sure, that are watching this already love Mercyful Fate, and you already have the album and you've heard the song. But for those who haven't, Burning the Cross is a song that you can find on the Return of the Vampire compilation, okay? If you get that, you can hear Burning the Cross. It was a song that they had recorded before they even got around to recording stuff on this album. But I think that song would have fit the mood of this album also, and it's got some great fucking riffs on it. And the music on that isn't even written by Hank Sherman. The music on Burning the Cross was written by a guitarist that they had at the time named Benny Peterson. And but I'll tell you what, man, great riffs. I mean, you can eat them up. You can pour those riffs in a bowl, put some milk on them, and just eat them like cereal. They're like fucking Lucky Charms. And it really should have been put on this album. I wouldn't take Satan's Fall off of Melissa, because that's just heresy, okay? Even if some of this song isn't, you know, quite to the level of perfection as other stuff, it's still ingrained in this album, and I can't imagine Satan's Fall not being on here. But Burning the Cross should have been on here too, god damn it. Now, moving on. Melissa. One thing I want to point out is in the 80s, you had a lot of power ballads. You had a lot of songs about guys mourning their lost love, or some chick that they wanted to fuck, you know, just all this different stuff. You know, stuff jumps into my head, like Love Bites by Def Leppard, you know, shit like that. You know, sugary pop type stuff. You know, Def Leppard had a lot of that shit. A lot of those power ballads from Def Leppard, for some reason, are jumping into my brain. You know, like Photograph and Foolin', and so just using those examples, you know, those Def Leppard songs. Those songs were sugary, and they were written about, you know, your run-of-the-mill type of girl, pure and sweet. She may be a heartbreaker, but she's not bad, she's not evil or anything. Well, in a song like Melissa, it just flips that shit on its head. The girl that King Diamond is singing about in this song, I like to picture her as a sultry enchantress, you know, that's into evil. Like, she's actually dark. You know, think of the Lady and Lady Evil off of the Heaven and Hell Black Sabbath album, something like that. You know, she has a moral compass, but she leans toward the darker side of things, you know, so she's not all bad. But she's definitely got a bad streak in her, you know? That's the feel from this song, okay? He's singing about when he says she was a witch, he's singing about a lady who actually was a witch, and, you know, she probably did put curses on people, and she had a vengeful side. And the way the song starts out, you know, the lead's on here. The lead, actually, they wanted to make it sound like it was somebody crying. Because, of course, the King Diamond, he's singing from the point of view, like, he's heartbroken. He's heartbroken because Melissa's been taken from him, you know. She's been burned at a stake and everything because she was a witch. And, you know, those opening lyrics are so powerful. The music is so sorrowful, but it sounds evil at the same time. It sounds wrong. And then that was was my first impression when I first heard this title track, when I first heard Melissa. And when King Diamond starts singing, he's singing in this almost disembodied type of way. He sounds, you remember earlier how I said he sounds haunting and ghostly. Well, in this song, his voice is right there with you, okay? That disembodied voice. And it gets right inside your head and it tugs at you. And when he says, I'm kneeling in front of the altar, Satan's cross upon the wall, it gives you goosebumps because it just seems so wrong. Because he's singing in this sorrowful, sad way, but something about the disjointedness when he says, I'm kneeling in front of the altar, Satan's cross upon the wall, because that just sounds evil. It sounds wrong, the way it's mixing with this oddly welcoming music in a way. The music kind of sounds clean, and it just sounds like it's something that should not be. It sounds like what King Diamond's saying is something that shouldn't be said. That's how kind of transgressive it is. Because this is a fucking love song, but it has this satanic type thing interjected in it. And you know, it's like that Christian type Satan, where Satan's like something real. He's like this real deity, and they're worshiping it. So that's what makes it seem so kind of horrific and creepy. You know, those parts later on in the song, where the distorted rhythm guitar drops out and you just got some clean notes in there and you got the bass, and then you just got that sorrowful lead guitar on there just playing, and it feels all alone. You just kind of hear a few clean notes and some bass kind of playing, but the lead guitar is the driving point, and it just pulls at your soul. You can just kind of feel it ripping it out of your body because it's so sad. So this song just wins on many levels because it's just flipping the love song type thing on its head in all of the ways I just described, just totally distorting it and turning it into something else. Mercyful Fate is taking the concept of a love song and just transmogrifying it in a way that kind of harkens back to Black Sabbath, what they did on NIB on their debut album, you know, where it's about Lucifer falling in love with a human girl and all of that. But this song just takes that even further in my mind. Just the atmosphere of it, the reverb, the cavernous sound. Great song. So yes, Mercyful Fate, Melissa. This is an all-time classic. Everyone knows that. I don't need to tell you. When I go back and listen to Melissa and Don't Break the Oath, Don't Break the Oath has songs that are just as strong as the songs on here, okay? I love Don't Break the Oath also. But I like the production a little bit better on Melissa. It's not quite as razor sharp on this album. It just feels like a little bit more room to breathe, a little bit more depth. There's just a little bit more air to the sound, if you get my drift. On Don't Break the Oath, they kind of shifted some stuff on the knobs, you know what I mean? And they make it sound a little bit sharper and everything. The riffs really cut at you. I like the sound on this. There's a little bit more warmness on here. And so I do like the production on Melissa a little bit better than I do the production on Don't Break the Oath, but they're both classic albums. Now, I wanted to tell you about a song that also should have been on here. Remember how I said Burning the Cross? I really wish they would have recorded that during these sessions. Well, there is another song that they recorded early on during the sessions for Melissa, and it's called Black Masses. Now, they did not like the sound they were getting from when they recorded that song, so they ended up just putting it, you know, it became a B-side type song. But it shouldn't have been a B-side. I don't care if they think the sound wasn't as good. You know, the sound is a little bit more muddy on Black Masses, but god damn it, is that song a mighty classic. Black Masses is just as good as anything else on this album, and it should have been on this album proper. It just has great riffs in it. It has those great devilish lyrics. You know, King Diamond on that, he's talking about sacrificing babies and shit. I know that puts some people off, but it fits in with the B-movie type imagery on this album, okay? Like I said, the riffs on it, they rock. The riffs on Black Masses, you remember how I was talking about how Hank Shermann, and even in the 90s when King Diamond was contributing music, contributing riffs. Mercyful Fate has always known how to rock, how to fucking rock out. And the music on Black Masses will make you bang your fucking head, even with all of this transgressive, you know, boundary smashing, satanic lyrics that King Diamond was throwing out to scare the shit out of your parents. You know, you could rock out to this music. If Mercyful Fate would have been able to get on some bigger bills back then, who knows, back in the early 80s, maybe they would have gotten more exposure and reached, you know, even wider influence, you know, because that was the shame. I think Mercyful Fate, it was sad that they kind of broke up, you know, too early. You know, Hank Shermann and King Diamond had major creative differences. You know, King Diamond wanted to keep pursuing all of this dark metal and, you know, in-your-face type stuff, whereas Hank Shermann wanted to go in a poppier direction. You know, he wanted to go in a more commercial direction. He didn't want to be, you know, shrouded by all of the satanic trappings that King Diamond was into. So that's why Mercyful Fate ended up splitting up. And, you know, of course, King Diamond went on to great acclaim with his solo act and, you know, created some fantastic fucking albums. But I'm getting way off track. We're supposed to be just talking about Melissa. And the bottom line is Melissa is a classic. You guys all know that. I know that. So, you know, it's the perfect time of year to put this album on and play it loud and just feel that dark rush of sinister energy all around you as this music plays. I thank you guys for watching this video, and guess what? I'll see you again next time.